She shouldn't have been anywhere near that jet. Not at 1:40 a.m., not in the middle of a restricted private hangar, and definitely not standing there in worn-out sneakers and a jacket too thin for the cold wind cutting across the runway. The $20 million private jet sat silent under harsh white lights, its polished body reflecting the chaos around it. Engineers circled it like surgeons who had already lost the patient. Tools scattered, voices tense, deadlines missed. And standing just outside the circle, barely noticed, was a black homeless girl watching everything like she already knew the answer. The engine had failed twice during testing. No clear reason. No warning. Just a sudden drop in pressure followed by complete shutdown. The kind of failure that shouldn't happen on an aircraft this advanced. The kind of failure that had already cost hours, thousands of dollars, and the patience of the man now pacing in a tailored coat just a few feet away. He wasn't just any client. He was the owner. A billionaire with a schedule that didn't allow mistakes. His jaw was tight, his voice sharp, and every few seconds he checked his watch like time itself had personally offended him. Fix it, he snapped again, though no one had moved any faster the first 5 times he said it. They were trying. 5 certified mechanics. 1 senior engineer, all trained, all experienced, all completely stuck. And still, she watched. Her name was Ava Carter. At least that's the name she'd been using for as long as she could remember. No one had ever confirmed it. No birth certificate. No records. Just a name written on a piece of paper that came with the only thing she owned that felt permanent, a thin silver necklace she wore every single day, tucked beneath her shirt, close to her skin. She didn't know where it came from. She didn't know who gave it to her. But she knew one thing. It mattered. Ava shifted slightly, stepping closer to the edge of the hangar light. No one noticed. They never did. People saw what they expected to see, and a homeless girl didn't belong in a place like this, so their eyes skipped over her like she was part of the background. But Ava saw everything. The way the engineer kept checking the same panel, the way the pressure readings didn't match the behavior of the engine. The sound, more than anything, the sound. Machines talked if you listened long enough, and Ava had spent years listening. But before this moment, before the engine, before the billionaire, before everything about to change, you have to understand how she got here. Because girls like Ava don't just walk into private hangars at 2 a.m. and start diagnosing million-dollar problems. They get pushed there, piece by piece, by a life that doesn't leave many other options. She never knew her parents. Not even their names. The earliest memory she had was of a crowded shelter, the smell of damp blankets, and a woman at the front desk asking questions no one answered. She moved from place to place after that. Temporary homes, short stays, people who tried, people who didn't. No one cruel enough to leave scars you could see, but no one kind enough to stay either. And when you grow up like that, you learn something early. Don't rely on people. Rely on what you can touch, what you can fix, what you can understand. For Ava, that was machines. It started small. Broken radios. Old fans. Things people threw away without thinking twice. She would pick them up, take them apart, study them like puzzles. No one taught her. No manuals, no classes, just curiosity and time. Lots of time. By the time she was 15, she could fix things most adults wouldn't even attempt. By 18, she could take apart an engine and put it back together better than it was before, if she had the right tools. Most of the time she didn't, so she learned to work without them. She slept wherever she could. Abandoned buildings. Bus stations. Once, for nearly 3 months, behind a small repair shop near the edge of the city. The owner never officially let her stay, but he never chased her away either. Sometimes he'd leave broken parts in a box outside. No words, just parts. Ava understood. That was his way of helping. And every night, when the world got quiet, she would sit under whatever light she could find and work. Screws laid out in lines, pieces organized in ways that made sense only to her. Her hands moved fast, confident, precise, because machines didn't lie. They didn't leave. They didn't forget you existed. The necklace was the only mystery she couldn't solve. It was simple. Silver, worn from years of being handled, but the pendant, small, oval-shaped, had something engraved on the back. Not a full name, just initials. Faint, almost erased by time. She had tried to read it 100 times, under different lights, at different angles. Never clear enough. Just enough to remind her that it meant something. That she came from somewhere. That she wasn't completely invisible. Ava touched it now, instinctively, as the wind picked up again across the runway. Back in the hangar, frustration was building. The senior engineer stepped back, running a hand through his hair. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered. "We've checked everything." "Then check it again," the billionaire said coldly. Ava exhaled slowly. They were looking in the wrong place. She took a step forward, then another. This time someone noticed. "Hey, what are you doing here?" One of the mechanics snapped, turning toward her. Ava didn't stop. "You're looking at the wrong system," she said, her voice calm but steady. There was a pause. Not silence. Not yet. Just that brief moment where people decide whether to laugh or listen. They chose to laugh. "Yeah?" Another mechanic said, shaking his head. "And what would you know about it?" Ava didn't react. She just pointed. Not at the main engine panel, not at the obvious failure point everyone had been focused on for the past hour. She pointed slightly lower. A smaller section, overlooked. The senior engineer frowned. The billionaire turned. For the first time, his eyes landed on her properly, not as background, not as a problem to remove, but as something unexpected. Ava held his gaze for a second, then said quietly, "You're wasting time." A few of the men scoffed. One of them started toward her, clearly ready to escort her out. But the billionaire didn't move. He looked at where she was pointing, then back at her. Something shifted, just slightly. "Let her talk," he said. Now it was quiet. Ava stepped closer to the jet, close enough to see the details clearly, close enough to hear what everyone else had missed. She raised her hand, hovering just above the surface of the panel, and for a second, just 1 second, no one said a word. Then she spoke. "You didn't lose pressure," she said. "You misread it." Silence. Real silence this time. Because the moment she said it, everything changed. For a moment, no one moved. Not the engineers, not the mechanics, not even the wind slipping through the edge of the hangar. The sentence hung in the air, simple but heavy. "You didn't lose pressure. You misread it." The senior engineer frowned immediately, almost offended by how easily she said it. "That's not possible," he replied quickly. "We ran full diagnostics." Ava didn't argue. She didn't try to prove anything with words. Instead, she stepped forward, calm, focused, like she had already made up her mind. "Your sensors are reading the symptom," she said quietly, her eyes fixed on the panel. "Not the problem." A mechanic laughed under his breath, shaking his head. "And you figured that out just standing there?" Ava ignored him completely. She leaned slightly closer and pointed again, this time more precisely. "It's not failing up there," she said, nodding toward the main engine housing everyone had been working on for hours. "It's feeding wrong data from here." This time, the senior engineer didn't respond immediately. That hesitation was new, and a billionaire noticed it. "Check it," he said, his voice controlled but firm. The engineer crouched reluctantly and opened the smaller panel Ava had indicated. He adjusted his light and began scanning the components. For a few seconds, nothing changed. Then his expression shifted. "Wait," he murmured, leaning in closer. Another mechanic stepped beside him. "What?" The engineer exhaled slowly. "There's a feedback loop. The sensor is cycling bad data back into the system." He looked up, confused. That shouldn't even be possible. Ava answered without looking at him. It is if the calibration reset didn't complete properly, she said. It's reading old values and correcting for something that isn't happening anymore. Silence followed again, but this time it wasn't disbelief. It was realization. The engineer turned back quickly, his hands moving faster now, adjusting connections, running a manual override sequence no one had tried before. If she's right, he muttered. The billionaire took a step closer, not toward the jet, but toward Ava. You've been fixing the wrong problem, she added quietly. The engineer hit the reset again. 3 seconds passed. Then 5. And then the engine came alive. It wasn't loud at first, just a low, steady hum, like something waking up. The engineer froze. The mechanics stopped talking. The billionaire didn't blink. The hum grew stronger, smoother, stable. No fluctuation. No warning. Just power. Run it, the billionaire said. The engineer did. The engine responded instantly, clean and perfect, like nothing had ever been wrong. No alarms. No failure. It was fixed. No one spoke for several seconds. One of the mechanics finally let out a quiet laugh, disbelief still in his voice. The senior engineer stood slowly, staring at Ava like he didn't understand what he was looking at. "How did you?" he began, but the question died before it could finish. Ava stepped back slightly, brushing her hands against her jacket like it was nothing. "I've seen it before," she said simply. It wasn't entirely true, but it was enough. The billionaire was still watching her, not casually, but with focus. "Who taught you?" he asked. Ava shook her head. "No one." The answer came without hesitation. His eyes studied her for a moment, her worn clothes, her posture, the quiet confidence in the way she stood. Then, without meaning to, his gaze dropped slightly. Just for a moment. But that moment was enough. Because that's when he saw it. The necklace. It had slipped out from under her shirt while she was working, catching the light just enough to be noticed. A thin silver chain, worn with time. A small pendant. Nothing flashy, nothing expensive, but the second his eyes landed on it, everything changed. His expression froze completely. The world around him kept moving, the engine humming, the mechanics whispering to each other, but he didn't move. His eyes locked onto the necklace like it was something far more than metal. Ava noticed his silence first, then the way he was staring. Not at her, but at the necklace. Instinctively, she reached up and pulled it closer to her chest. "Something wrong?" she asked. He didn't answer immediately. His hand lifted slightly, almost without control. "Where? Did you get that?" he asked, his voice rough. Ava frowned, confused by the intensity of the question. "This?" she said, holding the pendant between her fingers. "I've always had it." He stepped closer, his focus sharpening. "Always?" She nodded. "As long as I can remember." His breathing changed, subtle but real. "What's on the back?" he asked. Ava hesitated. No one had ever asked her that before. "I don't know," she said. "Initials, I think. They're worn out." He swallowed hard. "Can I see it?" Now she paused, not out of fear, but instinct. That necklace was the only thing she had that felt like it belonged to her. But something in his voice made her slowly lift it, turning it so he could see. He leaned in, close enough for the light to hit the back of the pendant, close enough to read what little remained. And the second he saw it, his entire body went still. His hand trembled. Then more. "No," he whispered under his breath. Ava's expression tightened. "What?" He didn't answer. He was staring at the necklace like it was a memory he thought was gone forever. Around them, people were still talking, the engineer confirming the system was stable, but none of it reached him. He stepped back slowly, running a hand across his face. "This isn't possible," he murmured. Ava lowered the necklace, her confusion growing. "What isn't?" she asked. He looked at her then, really looked at her, studying her face, her eyes, like he was searching for something hidden in plain sight. "Where did you say you got this?" he asked again. "I didn't," she replied. "Because I don't know." That answer hit him harder than anything else, because deep down he was already starting to understand. That necklace was never supposed to leave his family, not ever. And yet, here it was, around the neck of a girl who claimed she'd had it her entire life. Which meant this wasn't coincidence, not even close. And if he was right, then fixing the jet wasn't the miracle that happened tonight. Finding her was. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The engine was still running behind them, smooth and perfect, but it didn't matter anymore. The real shift had already happened. The billionaire stood there, staring at her, not like a stranger, but like someone who had just found something he thought was gone forever. Ava felt it in the silence, in the weight of his gaze, in the way everything suddenly felt too quiet. "What's your name?" he asked finally, his voice lower now. "Ava," she replied. "Ava Carter." He repeated it slowly, almost to himself, then shook his head. "That's not your real name," he said. Ava's expression tightened. "It's the only one I've got." He nodded, like he expected that answer, then reached into his coat and pulled out a small, worn photograph. He held it out carefully. "Look at this." Ava hesitated, then took it. A woman stared back at her from the image, young, calm, standing in sunlight. There was something about her face, something familiar she couldn't explain. Ava frowned slightly. "I don't understand," she said. The billionaire exhaled slowly. "That woman was my wife," he said. His voice held steady, but just barely. "And the necklace you're wearing, I gave it to her." Ava's grip on the photo tightened. "That doesn't prove anything," she said quickly. "It could have ended up anywhere." He nodded once. "It could have," he agreed. Then his voice dropped. "Except she didn't lose it." Ava didn't move. "She disappeared," he continued. 20 years ago. With our daughter." The words landed heavily, settling into the space between them. Ava felt something shift inside her, something she didn't want to name yet. "We searched for years," he said. "Everywhere." And then, nothing. He looked at the necklace again, then back at her. "Until tonight." Ava shook her head slowly. "You don't know that," she said. "You can't." He didn't argue. Instead, he pulled out a card and placed it in her hand. "You're right," he said quietly. "I don't know." "Not yet." He met her eyes. "But I can prove it, if you let me." Ava looked down at the card, then back at him. Her thoughts felt louder than the world around her. Too many questions. Too many possibilities. "If I'm wrong," he continued, "you walk away. Nothing changes." He paused. "But if I'm right, then the answers you never had are finally waiting for you." Ava stood still, the necklace resting in her palm now. For years it had been nothing more than a question, something she carried without understanding. But now, it felt different. He stepped back, giving her space, not forcing anything. Ava looked down at the pendant, turning it slowly between her fingers, then closed her hand around it. When she looked up again, she didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She just gave a small nod. Not trust, not acceptance, but not rejection either. And as she slipped the necklace back against her chest, something inside her shifted. Just enough. Enough to know that the life she had been surviving might not be the only one meant for her. Because sometimes the smallest things we carry aren't just pieces of the past. They're the beginning of everything. If this story touched you, don't forget to like and subscribe and tell me in the comments, would you have taken the chance or walked away?